You tuned to Risky Business. I'm your host, Bryan Hattingh. It's the Good News Business Talk Show, the heart of business, the soul of rock and roll. What can I say? And of course, with me, as always, John O'Shaw, co-host and sound engineer. Jono, and producer. How are you?
Hello, Bryan. I'm very good. And you? How's everything going? How's your week?
It's been a busy and eventful. It's my new terminology. People say, "How's it been?" I say, "It's been eventful."
Eventful, yes.
Because then it leaves it open to interpretation. So
Yes.
It's been an eventful week with some good events. I'm happy to report.
Good events, yes.
Yeah, and this is a great event because we've got a very special guest joining us from Amsterdam. In fact, if we get really accurate, from Harlem, just outside of Amsterdam.
Very nice. I've been there.
Yeah. Have you been there? There you go.
Yes,
I have too.
Sure, maybe
And,
15 years ago.
Wonderful place to visit.
Yeah,
Wonderful place to visit. And it's none other than Sarah Richardson, who is. We'll talk more about who all she is and what she's done. Let's first say hello, Sarah. Hi, welcome to the show.
Hi, Bryan. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure, Sarah. And for the edification of the listeners, you studied a Bachelor of Arts and then went on to do a Master's in Education and a Master's in Business Administration, MBA, with a focus on sustainability, which is such a big thing in the world.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you consult to organizations across the board on all sorts of issues of governance and compliance, and very importantly, around creating a more inclusive world. And we'll talk about the specifics of that. And you've got a cool online business called Streepi.com.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Tell us about Streepi. Let's go in there. I think that just sounds very funky.
Oh, all the way there. Okay. Yeah. Well, to begin with, just thinking about Streepi, my MBA was actually in leadership and sustainability.
Okay.
And when I got in there, I think a lot of people, when they think about sustainability, they think about the environment, not actually about what it means to have a sustainable world. And something that got me through my MBA was the thought of disability, and disability not really being represented, or almost as if it is a taboo subject, and that sort of thing. And that's what led me to the idea of Streepi, is kind of opening up the channels to people with disabilities to talk about all kinds of industries and what's happening in those industries and where the blind spots are. And through that kind of lived experience of these people, figuring out what the gaps are in different industries and trying to raise awareness and basically fill those gaps.
When you think about it, as you state, 1 in 6 people globally are living with a disability. I mean, that is mind-blowing. I had no idea of that.
Yeah, and that's according to the UN. Those are the figures of 2024. 1.3 billion people are living with a severe disability.
Wow.
So,
I mean, that's it's staggering, actually.
Yeah. I started out by asking questions when I started my thesis about this. I wasn't going to do my thesis about disability. I actually wanted to do it about regenerative travel. And then when I started asking questions to business owners about regenerative travel, I was thinking about the word itself, regenerative, because that seems to be the new buzzword that moves on from sustainability, that something's not just sustainable anymore, it's regenerative. And I felt that that travel was evolving in the way that it was evolving for the planet, but it wasn't necessarily evolving for the people. So when I asked the question to various business owners, you're working with regenerative tourism, what does that mean for people with a disability? Can they participate? And the answer was always, no, that's too expensive. And I wasn't happy with that answer.
No,
Yeah.
Gosh, I mean, and when you start talking of those sort of percentiles of 1.3 billion people, there must be a lot of people with challenges of different sorts and disabilities that travel. It's not like people with
Absolutely.
disabilities don't travel,
Yeah, and it's also falsehoods around people with disability, because you're dealing with 1.3 billion people that are disabled, but you're also dealing with all the people that are traveling with them, which is quite a lot. And the biggest spending power in the world is the US, and next to that it's China. But if you look at disability, people with a disability, and all their family and friends around them, they have a spending power of 18 trillion per year, according to, so it's not like there isn't money to spend, and that it's not a niche market.
No, it's not at all. No, goodness me. But of course, it extrapolates way beyond the issue of travel, albeit travel's a whole conversation and major subject and topic on its own. And one could make a whole program or more around the subject of what the challenges are and what the compromises are. Because and just before we leave it, my understanding of it is that many of the institutions, and I'm speaking with regard to airports and travel related institutions, are not that sympathetic and not that accommodating. It's just like, well, they got to fit in,
Yeah, they're not that accommodating. I don't know if you saw the recent article in The Guardian 2 days ago about the Olympian who was traveling from South Africa to the Netherlands.
No, I didn't see it. No.
She was told that if she wanted to use the bathroom on the aircraft, she had to either walk to it or go home.
What?
And this made world news. So this was featured in The Guardian and in other newspaper articles around the world. But as if it was something shocking. I can hear you're shocked by it, but this is something that people in a wheelchair face every single day.
I'd rather avoid it than take the risk of or even the challenge of going somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very normal for a lot of my clients talk about the fact that, if they go flying on a long haul, they have to not eat and not drink because there's just not the possibility to go to the bathroom. So that's something that you don't think about, right?
No, you don't. And you don't want to have to think about it. It's just crazy. It should be something seriously tabled and addressed. But if we extend the conversation outside of that to the broader realms of sustainability and regeneration, if you think of all the factors that are impacted or where sustainability is so important, we go from, there's the social factors and things that contribute to it, the inequality in terms of wealth disparities and health and well-being, environmental degradation affects public health, and particularly in marginalized communities, political factors,
Absolutely.
Policy incoherence, conflicting policies at local and national level around sustainability efforts. What does it mean? Governance and corruption. Wow, we see that corruption thing in our own country here prolifically and all around the world, where this whole crazy thing is, politicians are there as supposedly as servants of the people, but they're not. Global cooperation is insufficient. Collaboration in so many things, and dancing into the economic factors of resource depletion and sustainable consumption patterns, just lead to the depletion of natural resources and all sorts of things. It's such a vast subject, and sort of, where does one start?
Yeah. I think that at the end of the day, people, countries and companies want to make money. So it seems like going sustainable is not very attractive, and a lot gets lost in translation. And I think at the top we have the policymakers or the framework makers, right? Like the UN and the EU, and they make all these wonderful frameworks, and then the frameworks trickle down and they work their way into policy, and then that comes down into lawmakers, and everything just kind of becomes more and more vague as the ideas come down to companies. And from what I understand, that when these laws are being passed, they're made to be made as vague as possible so that they can be interpreted in many different ways, so that people can retain their business strategies and things like that. So a lot, unfortunately, gets lost. There's a lot of goodwill at the top, but then it seems to trickle down to money making being the end goal.
Yeah, policy.
In my opinion.
Policy and practice are sadly too often mutually exclusive rather than inclusive. I remember, and this is going back for yonks. Before I got into IT in those years back, I was in research and design of solar heating systems. Okay, in a time where solar heating was not even thought of, and we designed systems that we put into all sorts of places, including in Bahrain in the Persian Gulf, and we put them into hospitals, we put them into schools and homes and what have you. Just the hot water systems, heating them via solar, not electrical generation. Yeah. And so we'd spend all this time. We'd get the architectural drawings, and we would draw up in fine exactness, where the pipes would run, and we would measure, and we would do a QS on it and all the rest of it. And then one day I went out on site to where the guys were installing the system, and lo and behold, there were our beautifully drawn up drawings that I'd put so much time and pride into. And they had their fish and chips on it, and they were eating their fish and chips. And I said, guys, excuse me, but, what about the drawings? And they laughed at me and they said, Bryan, don't you know that those are the drawings? When you get out on site, you discover that the building was built differently and it doesn't line up with the drawings. So we just take them as a sort of, okay, we've got the idea, and we get on and put the system in as it has to go, and you just think, okay. Yeah. So just reflecting back on that, the lessons of, we can plan all we want, but if the difficulty index or sort of frustration curve is too high to implement it, it's just going to get put by the wayside.
Yeah, I think that's I like that idea, the frustration curve. That sounds very interesting. Yeah, and I mean, and often in big corporations, you have, I guess, a lot to do with this frustration curve, because you have all kinds of people that have to come together as well to make decisions, plus the constraints of how things are right now, and how do you make the transition, right?
Of course, yeah.
How do you transition to green? How do you make the transition to a sustainable future? And a lot of that also lies in the leadership and a new kind of leadership. We see leadership being so needing to evolve. Since the 80s, you see this kind of leadership with quite a lot of ego, and the leadership model of the 1980s, where it's all about this is what I say, and this is what is going to happen.
Yes, to command and control, your authoritarian.
Right.
Leadership style, dictatorial, my way or the highway.
Yeah, and with the future that we need, we really need a more co-creation kind of leadership where everybody gets involved to actually make a change. And I think that's a problem that we're facing at the moment.
Wasn't a big part of the sustainability conversation is about accountability. So how do you account, and where do we actually see the changes are occurring, and who's responsible, and who's going to take the fall for this at the end of the day? I mean, we always talk about the future generations are going to bear the consequence of our current actions. There's always these grand designs that, in some ways it's like, well, I'll let future me worry about that. And so how do we drive accountability here?
Well, in fact, in 1992, Tom Peters, a renowned leadership guru, global leadership guru, introduced in his book, Liberation Management, a radical shift in management practices, emphasizing and fostering a culture of innovation and flexibility. And it was such good stuff. And it really spoke to sort of neutralizing that obstructive layer of middle management where communications don't go from upwards downwards or from downwards upwards, and sadly, and really about including more voices in the room. And it took a long time. It really was a principle that sort of got played with and adopted by certain companies, but didn't really break through. And what we're seeing now today in what's a very changed world, because in the 90s we still lived in a complicated world. Now in the 21st century, the world's no longer complicated. The world's complex. And complexity and complication are two very different things. They often interchange and they can't be interchanged. So you can have complex things that are complicated, and vice versa. But the reality is that in a complicated world, you can map and plan and model solutions and ways forward. In a complex world, you've got to be dealing with things in a real-time way. So whilst you've got some form of strategy, you've got to realize that there's a dynamic of flux that's huge. And there's so much paradox and uncertainty that's taking place that you're needing to continually check out where are we in relation to where we're going and where we were, and how do we move from there? And very importantly, including all the voices in the room, because we're needing to hear from the youth, the youth that you're talking of in creating a new world for them. It's their world. They're the ones who are going to have to lead it. And in fact, they have a lot to say, and they have very real views, and some of them don't have any views. So let's exclude those. But there's those who do. And what's important for them is to make an impact and make a difference and to change the model, and it's not about this hubris infused and narcissistically infused leadership of win at all costs and one-upmanship. We've got to move into a much more collaborative state of being, albeit the world that we're in is terribly dysfunctional, terribly discordant. We're living in a state of leadership anarchy, unfortunately. But we've got to look through and past and beyond that to how do we fight our way through that and make this a world that's going to be a place where our grandchildren will thrive.
Yeah, I think the key is going back to what you said there, Jono, about accountability. The thing is that humans are, of course, very complex. I think rather complex than complicated, right?
Yeah.
It's a human problem, and you need everybody to feel accountable. Because if not everybody is accountable, there's not going to be one person that's ever accountable, right? So I think everyone needs to feel this accountability, and that only comes when everybody is part of. You can't have everybody part of the decision making, but like you said, Bryan, there needs to be more people in the decision making process. And when people feel part of the decision making process, that's when accountability happens. That's the theory behind it, anyway.
Absolutely. You tuned to Risky Business. I'm your host, Bryan Hattingh, with me, Jonathan Shaw, and our esteemed guest from Haarlem, outside of Amsterdam, Sarah Richardson. And we're talking about the world of sustainability and all sorts of factors, incorporating the challenges that people with disabilities have in traveling and in broader spheres. But importantly, we're talking about accountability. And Sarah, one of the things that came to mind as you were saying that is part of that comes down to us as parents, because so many parents are abdicating, and you must see this from your time in the world of teaching and education, that Parents just hand it over to the school, and in fact, let's not even get into that other side of the discussion with some of the things that have gone on in the world with what kids have been taught and encouraged to believe. But, let's assume well-intending teachers. I don't think it's fair for parents to abdicate and to leave it to the teachers. What are your thoughts on that?
Definitely not. Definitely not. No, there's been a huge change there as well in education. So much responsibility falling on the teachers, and yet the school system hasn't really even changed. So the things that we're learning in school, that's moving very slowly, and then at the same time, teachers are becoming not only educators, but external parents, and also in some way educators to the parents as well on certain issues.
And I think part of that is around creating awareness without people having to always experience the pain of their mistakes. Becoming aware of consequences. What are the consequences to what your choices are, to what you're doing, or your lack of choice? What are the impacts of what you're doing? And bring it back to what's the intentionality? Why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you on the journey that you're on? And getting children, particularly as early as possible, to be reflecting in a positive, awakening way around what life is and what it has in store for them and what they want to see in and through that. Because, there's so many other factors coming at us now, the information overload, the bombardment of media from everywhere, AI, all of these things that are influencing and affecting our decision processes. And it's so important right from a neuroscience point of view of maintaining a robust neurological well-being and personal well-being is in how we think and what we say and how we articulate our movie, and what movie are we creating for ourselves and what role are we playing in that, and realizing that there's no free lunch, that everything comes at a price, no matter how you dice or slice it, somewhere down the line, the piper's going to be paid, and you can defer certain learnings by jumping the queue, by cutting corners in the pursuit of the instant gratification and the have it now sort of pursuit. But the challenge that comes with that is that, like a loan, when you take out a loan, you accrue interest on it, and the interest compounds. And one day you're called to service that loan. In the same way with life, when you cut the corner, when you shortcut the learning, you leave out the important learning experience and experiential gain, and you go down track, at some point, you're going to find yourself needing to deploy the learning you didn't get and didn't have. And because you didn't, you've come up short. And life is calling in its debt when you don't even remember that you took out the loan. And the consequences at that point in time are way greater and way more painful than putting your head down and enduring the learning and pressing through the tough stuff to get there.
I think if I can jump in there, just some thoughts. The world has changed so much, like you said, from complicated to now complex. We're dealing with things like globalization, and of course that leads to this idea of diversity. And I think that brings us to the disabled conversation again about how I think we've just been exposed to a lot more or different paradigms that they didn't seemingly used to be. If I think of media, for example, you had such a small amount of sliver of things that you used to get exposed to, whereas nowadays you can traverse the halls of social media and you can hear pretty much every opinion there is out there, and boy, they will make sure that you know what that opinion is. So yeah, that's just my thoughts on how things have changed.
Yeah, I think that there's no room as a parent or an adult or an educator to be complacent anymore. I think doing that there's a huge risk in doing nothing. And it's certainly I tell this to my students as well, and to my own children, that there's always to make a better future, huge changes have to be made, and you have to be invested not only in yourself and your future, but the futures of others. It's no longer about yourself anymore.
Yeah. And I think what's so interesting is that in life we do things for one or two reasons, either to avoid a loss or to make a gain. In the absence of a bigger picture, we're going to take things on face value, and we're going to pick the one that looks the nicest or looks the easiest. And that often is exactly the wrong choice. It's the very thing you shouldn't be doing. And so hence the really important thing for people to have some form of vision and set of goals and set of purposes and plans. Meaning and purpose is critical at the heart of all of this. And so in the absence of that, people are going to make bad decisions. And in fact, when you discover in and through the whole journey of becoming focused and crystallized around where you're going, what you want to become, what you want to do, what you want to achieve, what you want to have, whatever it might be, whatever camp that falls into, or some total of that. And you become clear around it, and you understand the benefits and the value, and you understand the obstacles and roadblocks and what you have to do to get there. You discover on the way that the steps that you have to take to achieve it are steps of not just doing, they're steps of becoming, because you have to overcome self-limiting beliefs, you have to confront your fears, you have to work through your blind spots and the tough stuff. And that takes courage, and it takes effort, and it takes commitment, and sometimes sacrifice. Things that people won't do in isolation because it's not pleasant, it's uncomfortable. They want to do the easy thing. But when you can get people to find real meaning and purpose and value in the pursuits, then they take on those things. And as they take them on, they discover a new view and perspective of themselves and of the world. And it encourages them to enter into a whole new journey of transitionary life and sustained change and change embracement. And it removes this global fear, and I'm not talking global as in the world, I'm taking this global sort of overarching fear that people have of change and the uncertain, and getting to a place of getting comfortable with it and learning that the biggest risk in life is not to take a risk. And it's around, step out of your comfort zone, just get in there and do that. And if the intentionality is right and the passion's strong enough for what it is you're wanting to pursue, you'll go through those steps and you'll come out of it a more enriched, more engaged, more characterized person. And that's what we can give our children.
Yeah, don't forget, I think it takes a very strong person to come out and independently take action on their own. Most people are waiting for somebody else to lead them where to go and tell them what to do. That's why leadership is so important, right? Most people, I think, sit around and think everything's everybody else's responsibility. And I do tell, I was listening to what you were saying, and I tell my children, myself, independently, choose one thing to believe in, choose one thing to do good in this world, and do that and do that well and believe in it. And if you do that one thing, hopefully people around you will start doing something as well. But I think you do need that, and people find that very difficult. I think especially young people trying to make that difference when nobody else around them is doing it.
Role models came as a big thing for me, for example, and mentorship, and I find today that there's a lot of conversations around the sort of high functioning autism, and I believe I'm on that spectrum to some degree, and I think very differently. And had it been recognized far earlier, and back when I was a kid, it wasn't a thing, and you just had a different personality. Whereas nowadays there is a consideration for it, so to speak.
They might have locked you up, John, if they found out then.
I think they did. They sent me for extra lessons and writing and all of this, and I was terrible at relationships and making friends. But I've learned to understand myself in that way, and coming back to the role model thing, I think I saw how other people overcame difficulty, and that then led me to push through.
Yeah,
and
I think
Sorry, Sarah, go on.
Well, I was just going to say that that idea of having role models is just I don't know if that's so incredibly underrated, but it's just so incredibly important that people are that there are role models modeling the correct behavior, and not just in society, but at large, but also just in the community, because not everybody has it in their family.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's a lot of the things that we, as an educator, I see that a lot as well. And I think as a teacher, you have that responsibility to model behavior. But also, I'm trying to do that in my organization. Yes.
So fantastic. And what I'm just thinking of is imagine a world, and we can frame these things where we brought fun back into teaching and into learning. So if we brought fun into learning, and then you might have your critics who would say, "Oh, it can't just be about fun." Well, let's then evolve the fun into something called fulfillment. Let's make it fulfilling, of which fun is a subset. Because if it's fun, you bring joy into the room. And if you bring joy into the room, you bring energy, you bring life, you bring confidence, you bring celebration, you bring curiosity, and you bring ownership and accountability, because people want to be part of that. They want to be part of that. It's not this, oh, my Lord, I've got to go to school again, and I'm going to get this, this painful ritual of learning. And, it's just bring the fun back in. Let's change this. Let's live lives well lived. Let's not get into this thing of work. And one day we'll retire and you might have a bit of fun and then you'll die. It's like, let's have the fun at the start of it and have fun all our lives. And then it's just a seamless journey of joy. Why not?
And what about curiosity? I mean, what's your take on curiosity? Because for me, that was one of the biggest things that drove me, is that I was curious as to why this was happening this way, and I'd be, driven to find out.
You're curious about the things that you enjoy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think anyway, the one common denominator in effective learning is having fun. So you're right there. And I've got a question for you, Bryan.
Yeah.
What do you think the future of education should look like? I've got my own ideas, but
I think the future of education should look like something that infuses creativity into as much as what you can, self-discovery into as much as what you can, and very importantly, practicality and lived experience. So the more experiential that education can become, where you're living in the experience, where you're creating things and you're making them happen, and whether that's a business plan and developing a pseudo business or whatever it might be, or if it's in a community upliftment program, it's less about the textbook. And it's not that there isn't a need for the information, but as we know, information doesn't change behaviors. So what we're wanting to do is create this excitement about, as early as possible, being a contributor. So the more you learn at an early age to contribute to the world, the more fulfilled you will be, and the more fulfilled the world would be. So I don't quite know how that would look, but that would be the underlying theme of what I would want to see education being.
Sounds like my PhD.
That sounds like a breeding ground for innovation.
I would hope so, and bringing alive that right brain for people, that creative side of them, that in the normal world of schooling doesn't happen. because it's all left brain stuff, And yeah, we need the STEM, we need the maths, the science, the those things. We need all of that, but let's make sure that there's a balance.
Yeah, and also this idea about at the moment we have all these different subjects. You're going in, you're studying geography, you're studying biology, and English, but I think the magic really lies in the cross-section between where all of those things meet.
Yeah, absolutely. And teaching people, it's not about learning, it's about learning to think.
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing.
Critical thinking.
Hardest thing for me to get my head around was critical thinking.
Yeah, and that's the danger with AI, right? Because all the answers are in AI. They've got all the answers, but then the critical thinking comes from having the knowledge. You cannot think critically unless you own the knowledge yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
And AI doesn't have those answers.
And Sarah, in that, you are a protagonist and proponent of positive change in leadership, and you are consulting to organizations and institutions and people individually around that very thing. And I'm just so expectant of great things and hearing good reports. And how's it going? And how are people responding to your awakening them?
My awakening them. Yeah, it's interesting because there's I have a very big push from the side of the disability community to be heard. But on the other side, I think, government departments are very receptive here in the Netherlands. But I think organizations, we have I think I have my work cut out for me a little bit. There's I guess we're not as far as I would like to be here in the Netherlands in terms of disability awareness. So I hope that I can really, it's part of the reason why I started this. I hope that I can really make a difference in actually making accessibility part of everyday life and not as an add-on.
I like what you're saying, indeed. And in a way, it's the challenge is that you sort of it's most certainly an existing and long-standing world, if you want to call it that, or part of you. It's you creating a market. You're not really servicing a market in a way. You're the pioneer. You're a pioneer out there to do this, and it always takes a little longer. That entry point to the J curve is much longer than in other instances. When you're going into a mature market, whilst there's other competitive players, if you come in with a great differentiation and offering, it can get taken up quite quickly. Because people know what they're looking for, whereas here they're not sure.
Yeah, but I think the thing is that companies need to see, and organizations need to see also what's in it for them. I think that the idea about disability and inclusion, as I say, there's this fallacy that people think it's a niche market, and it's not. There's a fallacy that people think people with disability don't have money. It's also not true. So I'm having to convince organizations that it is a market. So the path is not laid out for me in red carpet, so to speak. So I've got a lot of convincing to do. It's a shame that it's like that, but it is like that.
So I suppose in and through that, then one has to look at your target, that very broad target market, and narrow it down to where the low-hanging fruit is. Who are going to be the early adopters? Who are going to be the guys who are going to take it on, so that you can create a beachhead of referenceability? Because what I love about this world that we're in is that big corporates, and the bigger the corporates, the better, suffer from FOMO big time. If one of their competitors has got this new thing, they've got to have it. They can't not be without it. So what you want is to get a couple of anchor clients who showcase this, and then it's just like, well, hey, Jack, these guys have got it. Why don't you? And you'll be surprised how quickly they come to the party.
Yep. No, absolutely. You only need one, and I see that there's if I send 10 emails out, I might not get 9 responses, but one will be very enthusiastic, and that's really nice. That's really nice to see. So change is happening, and I'm really happy to work with those partners who are very enthusiastic. So please give the listeners out there and your contact details with Streepi and yourself in terms of how you want to be connected with, whether it's on mail or whichever. Yep, well, sure. Email is perfect because I think the times are, I guess the times are the same, aren't they, from South Africa?
Yes, they are the same. They are the same, yeah.
But email is the best. And you can always find me at www.streepi.com, which is STREEPI, and at info@streepi.com.
Okay, that's great. Wonderful. So let's do that. And can I just say, wish you every success, and may you go from strength to strength. And thank
you so much, Bryan.
And may your children have wealthy parents and all those good things. And and just thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. We'll have you back again to tell your success stories. And
it'll be wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. And take care. And remember, listeners, that if you're not with the ones you love the ones you're with, and take time to show and tell the ones you love just how much you do. Take some time to love yourselves and give yourself a big hug. Jono, take care. Have a great week.
Thank you, Bryan. Thank you, Sarah. So great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
All the very best.